My name is Gina Reichert. I live and work here in the neighborhood, affectionately called Banglatown in Detroit. Some people think it's Hamtramck, but Hamtramck's that way. The Davidson Expressway is that way, and we are somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's an in-between zone. It's like a little slice, a little invisible world.
Little slice of cake.
Little slice of cake.
There's a cake thing happening.
Yeah, it's a cake today.
I like Invisible World.
Yeah.
And you are?
I'm Richard Newman. I am co-director of the Hinterlands. I also live in the neighborhood just a couple blocks away. And with Gina and my partner Liza and the Hinterlands and Powerhouse Productions, co-manage Playhouse, which is the space we're going to be going in.
When did you and Liza move to the neighborhood?
2010.
That's right.
Yeah.
Eva had just been born. My daughter had just been born.
Yes, and we had first moved into this house right here. And was the first house we lived in, and then now live just two blocks away.
Stayed close.
Stayed very close, and then started working on Playhouse in 2012. 2011. Late 2011. And our first performance in here was 2013.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mitch and I bought our house here in the neighborhood in 2005. So, and we had none of this was an agenda that we ever had in mind. To start.
Yeah.
This was not some plan that we showed up with. How to begin? Well, the first project house is across the street here, the Powerhouse. We bought it in 2008 as mortgage crises were ravaging the nation. And it was a bank-owned property.
I want to do a zoom in, zoom out. You can keep talking.
Okay.
This is supposed to be fun.
Watch out for the car.
Okay, watch out.
And I mention all this, I guess, because a lot of the work we do has to do with, it started with ideas that we developed in this house. The nonprofit we formed in 2010, which is called Powerhouse Productions. And so this is the namesake of the nonprofit. But it didn't start with the nonprofit. It started as just a project to really get a grip on what was happening with real estate in the neighborhood. It was Looney Tunes time. And suddenly, there were just empty houses and bank signs up, and I had never heard the word REO before, and I can't remember what it stands for now, but it basically means real estate offices, that are just looking to dump property. And people were taking responsibility for these empty houses, and there were tax foreclosures as well, and so we ended up purchasing this house for we started talking about market value a lot because there's an insanity to real estate market pricing that doesn't reflect community values, and that's kind of one of the major philosophies of our organization, of our way of thinking and working in the neighborhood is okay, so let's ignore the insanity of market value. It's all a construct that people made up anyway, and let's make up our own system. And so a lot of in terms of the houses and development and really reclaiming real estate for the community instead of for the banks, a lot of that has to do with this idea of arts, culture, and community activities at the heart of the spaces that we claim and steward, and not anything to do with market value, because it doesn't make any sense, and why would you follow insanity through time? So maybe with that we can walk this way. Up the ramp, our boardwalk stroll through the forest.
So one of the things I love about this ramp is we built it with the idea of it being for wheelchair accessibility, which it still hasn't fully achieved that.
But it is to code.
It is to code, yes.
It is to code.
But what has happened is this has ended up being a play zone for kids in the neighborhood. So kids ride their bikes on here or scooters, and also just hang out and chase each other.
Yeah, there's sort of an evening club, if we come back around, last night at 6-ish.
Yeah.
There's a whole scene.
Which spills out into the backyard of that house and the swing there. It becomes a play zone. So it's kind of a mini...
little pocket park.
It's a little pocket park, although unofficially.
We're working on it becoming more of a commons, which means the users take responsibility for their candy wrappers, for example.
What is done with candy wrappers now?
Sometimes
they're on the ground, sometimes they're in a bag. You know, they're
Yes, sometimes the bags are tended, and sometimes they see us and then they start picking them up. They being the juveniles.
yes.
But it's great. It's a great space. It's really fun to see it activated and misused in various ways.
And also, during the pandemic, we've been using it for some community singing. Since because Playhouse, we were doing these open singing, basically like community sing-alongs. But during the pandemic, we haven't been able to do that clearly inside. So we've had some smaller groups sing out on the ramp because spatially,
yes.
you can have for singing you need 16 feet.
Oh, right.
So you actually can get the 16 feet to safely sing out here.
And one day when we have outdoor concerts again, this is meant to be also a stage because we had been moving a riser stage in and out of the house. So this is one less thing we have to do if we next time.
So one of the one of the resident artist groups is Bongo School of Music, which is a traditional Bengali music school, and they do a lot of outdoor concerts. So which has been a really nice thing.
I wish this camera would capture some of the smells because someone's cooking something
smells
really
so
good.
Yeah, there's a point every day where if I haven't eaten,
It's probably
it's
that.
just torture. It's actually the house right behind Playhouse. It smells so insanely good.
Yeah, there's 2 kitchens.
Oh, wow.
It's a 2-unit.
Yeah.
So smell-o-vision next time, Ishan.
Yeah. We will work on that.
And so this is Playhouse. This is the lobby, and which is a little dark right now, but I'm going to walk into the main space and take a look.
So we float on a raft, on a river, on a raft, on a river, on a raft, on a river, on a raft, on a river. On a raft, on a river, in our little puddle of thoughts and habits and customs and dear reaching out to's. And of course, beneath that mint trap fuzz of ourselves, there flows that big, beautiful, horrible river of time that's past. Did you know there used to be a big river, if you will, that flowed through the whole middle of North America? It was called the something, and it went from Idaho to Louisiana, and that only happened maybe 500 million years ago, which is only about a tenth as long ago as the birthday of the world. And of course, time is like a river because it, of course, only flows in one direction. But time is also like a river because when it gets hot, it can evaporate and rain down in any old place. And if you don't have a hat or a newspaper to put over your head, you might get your hair wet with it. And it's also like a river because it can carve canyons into stone, and you can see the little bands there. Each little band, 10 million years, or whatever the signs of the park say, looking like a delicious Ukrainian honey cake. And if you time it right, you can take your cake server and slide it into the stone and get yourself a piece. And if you do, and you get it, then you better eat it. Maybe with a little tea, remorselessly, as fast as you can. I'll close my eyes and listen to hear the storm come round. Don't you see the stars? They glisten as we go in and out. Will the corn be growing a little tonight? As I wait in the field for you, who knows what grows in the morning light? We can feel the watery dew.
That was awesome.
That was incredible. How's the cake?
It's good. It has like a little lemon.
Oh.
I actually love Ukrainian honey cake.
Never had it before.
There's a Russian honey cake, they sell it at Werda, and it's like maybe the best cake I've ever had. So,
Good to know.
yeah, and it went really nicely with the tea, I have to say.
What kind
Yeah.
of tea was it?
It was just a normal tea, but it was like,
A nice black tea.
yeah, it was a nice combination tea going on. Yeah, I'm excited because like I haven't seen any of their. I mean, I've like know they're working on these cowboy songs.
Yeah.
So there's Scott and Maddie, who you just saw
Also
in
known
there.
as Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. So Maddie and Scott have been like working on this work related to westerns and to the West, actually, like the idea of the West. And so we've been in some of those like community singing sessions I mentioned. They've been like bringing in cowboy songs to work on. So like I've heard the cowboy songs, but didn't know like how they're working with them.
I mean, one of the things that I love about Playhouse is that it's this space where artists can come and performers and develop new work, and we make it work financially in a way that means it's not a burden on their practice. The schedule is flexible and controlled by the artist or the artist management.
Yeah.
It's not even management. It's like, I mean, it's meant to be a collective ownership structure, and we're slowly moving like away from the sort of board pyramid that we founded the nonprofit on, which is because that's what the paperwork told us to do, and that's what we did in 2009. I'm moving towards an idea of collective ownership and commenting. So, which is a partner. I think the Hinterlands, like we've been doing with you guys for a while now.
Yeah.
And so it's really about like who controls what, who takes responsibility and ownership of the space or the time or the schedule, who holds the keys,
Yeah.
how do things come and go, and what kind of flexibility is built into the system so it works for the artist. But the idea, like Scott and Maddie having some time and space to develop work there,
Yeah.
is like really critical of exciting practices that push ideas.
Yeah, and Scott being like living in a neighborhood too, so there's like a neighborhood artist, able to have like access. So
And also able to talk to neighbors about what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. So.
yeah, and it is like it's definitely a process like of like
Lots of trial and error and learning along the way.
yeah, but also like we're just like ingrained. We have this like there's like a mentality of like we just have like a system of like top down sort of mentality that we just understand.
Yeah.
Like so of like hierarchical understanding of like space ownership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like the idea of like what does it mean to take responsibility for, to like take care of a space, a place, like all of the intricacies of like running like even a tiny space like Playhouse, like all the things that need to happen, and like what that becomes, how that shifts from it being one person or organization's responsibility to like some sort of shared responsibility between the people who use it.
Yeah.
Horizontal way of.
Yeah, for sure.
Maintenance and care, Madison.
One of my students from this semester we talked about all the time. Hello? We made it.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hey, Liza. Fancy meeting you here.
Oh, great. Everyone's here. Does everyone want tea?
So one of the things I was going to say before we move on.
Oh, we don't need this chair. That's fine.
It's just one of the ideas behind Powerhouse Productions also, like why are we doing this in this neighborhood? I think it has to do with this idea that like instead of the arts and culture and community like are all interrelated. The idea of having arts and culture in the everyday life and everyday practice of a community, or just that artists are community members, like we're human neighbors too. And it's not always about like the finished piece that gets shown in an institution that people are expected to be drawn to. That for me anyway, it's more about like the practice of being an artist and what does that mean? Like how does that change your daily life? How do you think differently about image or space or ideas? And I don't know, arts practices usually involve trial and error and failure and working through ideas and testing ideas and things.
Much like this video.
Much like we're doing right now. There's like a new technology and we had to rig something and then like I don't know where the frame is and like learning how the sound works and like that's all part of it. So I'm more interested in the messiness of those things and not like, I mean I love finished polished things also, but it's like on a pedestal or in a frame, and then I think especially for you, it's like how did it get there?
The process is just as important.
Yeah, and I love mystery, but I don't think people should be alienated by mystery. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and also I always I use the metaphor of like a corner store, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a bunch of corner stores in the neighborhood, and like I don't go to all of them, right? And like also, but when I need something, I'll go check out, see if the corner store has it. It's like okay, great, and like the corner store may not have like everything for me somehow. In fact, it may be like for another community even, like in terms of like what kind of products are offered there. But like the corner store's there, and artists often like we're expected to like do everything somehow in the sense of like that like
solve all the problems.
yes, like we're supposed to like
problems.
Understand all the technology
and like somehow deal with like problems at a municipal level like is now, but like the corner store like nobody there's asking me to work there, You know what I mean? Like, nobody's like, come and work at my corner store. And like that, I would feel like that was crazy a little bit. Like I would feel like that would, whereas like somehow artists had this idea that everyone should be as interested in our work as we are somehow. And, but it would be just as ridiculous of an ask for like, our neighbor to like get involved with what we're doing.
Or for the corner store to be like, use every single product we have at the corner store to do something. But there's some things at the store that work for you, some stuff that works for me. So maybe I'll expand into this other thing. I think the corner store metaphor is pretty good if you think about it in that way too.
Especially because I live in a corner store.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally.
Not everything is for everybody, and not everybody has to use everything.
And there's not a problem
Or
with
like
that.
everything.
But the problem
either.
is if you can't get the things you need, that's the
Yes.
issue. It's like, it's if, so like a space like Playhouse, for instance, it's like we, in terms of programming it, like we don't feel like every event needs to speak to every person, but we do feel like there need to be offerings that do. Like there need to be things that can speak to different neighbors. But like, let's say like our practice of making like laboratory-based theater works of like, you know, fairly experimental, sometimes esoteric, like not everybody's going to be into that. Like frankly, sometimes I'm not even into what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
But we also don't know who is and who isn't,
Exactly.
and so it's open for people to go. Like, yeah, those are sort of the two principles. Like, don't make assumptions, and then there need to be a variety of things that people can feel welcome to. And that means having things outside, that means having things inside, that means having things that are in other languages, and exclusively, and that means having things,
Like for instance, like the,
Food-based.
I mean, definitely food-based things.
Oh, does anyone want this?
First, can I say that this tea is delightful?
I
thank
What
you.
am I drinking?
Thank you so much.
What type of tea
I'm
is
glad I
it?
forced you to drink it.
It is Hawthorne tea. It's just Hawthorne berry.
That were picked from.
No, these are not.
Okay.
Because there are Hawthorne trees in the schoolyard.
There's also a Hawthorne cheese at the park, in which we also.
Harvested because Zara.
Our neighborhood herbalist and
Oh, okay.
artist who programs one of the other project houses.
She got people into harvesting the hawthorn from the park.
So is it like a berry?
It is a berry. It's
Okay.
related to the apple.
Oh.
They also drink it. They also use it in Chinese food, and so this is Chinese hawthorn. Because I ran out.
Of the
I
other
used-
hawthorn?
I used
Yeah.
it all, but it's really good
so
for
good.
your heart,
Yeah.
both the organ and the like sort of spiritual.
Coming together in
Right.
community.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, so it's a tisane technically, and then if you guys want this, this is actually part of a project that we're doing.
Is this from the Kohler project?
This is
Yeah.
from the project we're doing at Kohler Art Center. That is, this one's called Recipe Box Memory Box, and we just did a remote residency a couple months ago with using food to look at culture and history and perceived identity in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And so there are 3 different parts of the project that the residency, and one part was we asked people to send in recipe cards with beloved recipes on them, and we said we'd make all of them and put them into a zine, like a community cookbook zine that's sort of modeled off of the Foxfire books, if you're familiar with them, which was like a community-based publication that came out of rural Georgia, and it's like community wisdom and food and like cultural things. Anyways, then there's
How many
other.
cards did you get?
How many cards?
Yeah, how many recipes?
Roughly.
I think in the 30s right
Yeah,
now, but they haven't all
pretty
come
good.
in.
Yeah. Yeah, they're still coming in, and the deal is like anyone who sends us a recipe will cook the recipe and eat it. So it's like the.
So, all you watching this, what's the address?
So the other part of the project is we cooked. We had made one-on-one appointments with people and cooked with them over the phone.
Right.
Oh, nice.
Right.
So like, so they would like bring a beloved recipe and then we would cook it together.
Not video phone, just
Yeah,
like
just phone
So
phone.
you'd have to describe what it was that was happening.
I do that with my mother in India. She because when she sends me a recipe, she says when it looks all right, do this. I'm
Yeah.
like, what? I don't know what that means.
Exactly.
She's like put
She's made it so many
she's
times.
like put like an index finger worth of water into the food. I'm like, I don't know. This doesn't
Are your
work.
index fingers the
See-
same size? Yeah, exactly. This is why we did this.
No, and it's like there's something about explaining it because I used to call my dad was a really good cook, and I used to call him and ask him to explain like some of the things I'd seen him cook, you know, and like I tried to cook them and I'm like, this didn't turn out, you know, and like, and I would like call him and be like, what do I actually do? And this kind of process of like, what's not in the recipe, you know, and like this is, which to me, this is a like the recipe in that way is a commons, like that, like, because it can't just exist on paper, like it has to be cooked, you know, and like through cooking it, I'm taking care of it, and like, and keeping it alive, like, and somehow like it is this body of knowledge that is really, really important.
I feel like that was our best commons project, actually.
I love the salad table.
So could you explain this idea of the commons? You've brought it up in reference to several different projects and things within the community.
Yes. In synopsis, well, I mean, it really is just about like a shared space, but it means you're sharing rights and responsibilities. And I think one of the things that that always comes up when you talk about the commons is it's not not written rules. It really is like the action.
Understanding.
It's the understanding, and then the collective action of like the space itself.
And there
So
are
it's behaviors.
consequences. So it's around a certain group of people engaging with a certain resource. So like the internet is a bit of a commons.
Or could be.
Could be.
Yeah.
Right now it's, you know, and it's being partitioned, it's being enclosed through different corporations. Or like like songs.
Rivers. Okay.
Yeah.
Songs
are a commons.
On a more like conceptual level, you know.
Yeah. Or you can have like the lot over there is kind of operates as a commons, or a river like the Great Lakes watershed is a commons. Should be a commons.
Should be a
Shared
commons,
resource.
yeah.
And there definitely are like different moments of like enclosure and openness, is, you know, like what's been privatized or what has been monetized in different ways. So from the internet to the water system.
Right.
But I do think, well, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say like that, like some like commons scholars like we'll talk about. There's no commons without commoning. So that commoning is an act of taking something that's that is maybe it's a private resource or is somehow enclosed, and that is a practice of how can this be opened up? How can it be? How can there be a shared responsibility instead of a single owner?
So like food co-ops are a form of commoning. I think it keeps coming up because we're looking for a collective ownership structure in terms of Powerhouse Productions, like you know, moving towards that like officially and more formally. And because the three of us are involved or have been involved in this art, culture, and commoning group, which includes artists and practitioners from different parts of the country. And so we've been talking a lot about like what does it mean to have like to build an organization around commoning or an arts practice around commoning, or I don't know what else.
Or what are the inherent relationships between art practices and an act of commoning? And also because commons is a kind of New Englandy, also British word, then how does that work in a more diverse context, and like how does it not remain Eurocentric, or where are commons elsewhere in the world? What other words do people use instead of commoning to mean the same thing?
Yeah, I mean it is like it's the thing with any
Indigenous
language.
practices or,
Yes.
yeah, like,
Or like
There are plenty
inherently
of-
commons based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but they don't really call it that.
So, you earlier spoke about rights and responsibilities like spread between people. How do you either prevent or like actually take care of a situation where someone or something can become exploitative to that?
Right. What are the transgressions? Like, how do you deal with the transgressions?
Consequences.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, for me, in Powerhouse Productions, like the most common space that we steward or whatever is the skate park, which we will go to shortly. But in terms of it's called Reichert Sculpture Park. It's a skate park. It's public outdoor concrete, so it's open whenever. Like, there's no key to lock and unlock the thing. There have been many transgressions, but I also think it's wildly successful because given how open and free it is, and how seldom I actually look in on anything. I don't like stand there and lifeguard the space. There's no lifeguard on duty at the skate park. There actually haven't been any major transgressions. Everybody knock on everything wood right now. And it really is a space for like people to be as open and like their behaviors would go unchecked. And I think it works because there are a couple of crews of skaters and skateboard lovers who really claim it as like their own happily, and they do communicate with us and we communicate with them, but it means that they want it to be successful, like it's their space, and so they take ownership of it in the sense of like the use of and the activities that go on there. And so I think skateboard culture is just a really good example of that.
Like you can't skate if it's full of trash.
Yeah.
Like so like there's also like clear
It's
things.
inherent.
Yeah, like you
Yeah,
have to like keep it. Yeah.
It affects the way they want to use it, and
Yeah.
therefore like they tend to it.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
don't know if there's another example.
I
I
think
mean,
it's
the
a good
kids
one.
in the garbage.
We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
or,
kids in the garbage on the ramp. Yeah.
or like we've had people. We're pretty open with how when we have someone in residence at Playhouse, we're like, do what you want to do. And we've had people like pour water all over the floor, and we're like, okay, that is not going to work.
Or like it
So-
could work if we planned for it, or like
Yeah.
what are the kinds of. But it's also
And
like
some of it is like we learn then how to articulate what the agreements are, or like what the kind of agreements that we need. And it's like we're thinking long term here. Like we want to be 10 years in, so these are things that we want. Like we want it to be affordable for people in the neighborhood. We want it to be like, or we're like, you're not going to do. It doesn't have a public component. You can just use the space, or just sort of thinking about articulating what is the resource,
Yeah.
because sometimes
Yeah,
people can't
defining
see
the
it or
resource.
understand it.
and we also like even if people we've always had at Playhouse like even if their tickets are charged, it's always free for neighborhood residents. So like that it can't be that there's like
Yeah.
and also like that there's somehow like moving away from like okay we're gonna like use a space in the neighborhood and then charge money to people who live there. It doesn't make sense. Like
Put up with our shenanigans.
yeah, exactly. It's like there has to be some other way of arranging.
I think also like what you like this idea of long term, like this is a long term relationship building situation we're in here that we put ourselves in, and that's what we want. So it also means that we have time to either whether it's trying things or neighbors understand us differently, or we know different neighbors. I mean, at this point, I've seen neighbors grow up, and so there's a comfort level and an openness to like asking questions or challenging assumptions that we make. But I think like the long-term relationship building also has to do with. I don't know if commenting is always long-term, but I think commenting works very well at a certain scale and over a certain amount of time. And then you learn and grow and develop. We really love the partnership model because we get to stay small and get to both like host and facilitate other people's program needs without having to build our own. So I think it's one of our other principles is like how do you build collaborative partnerships instead of competing for resources?
Yeah, but it's always in use. And
Yes. Yeah.
There's not redundancy.
Yeah.
Everybody can share.
So now we're at Squash House, and look who's here.
Whoa! Wow! What a surprise!
I wonder what's gonna happen. We'll just have to find out.
We'll all come in this time, yeah.
As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. That's a quote from Frederick Jackson Turner's seminal 1893 essay titled The Significance of the Frontier in American History. I'll say it again. As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. It's a complicated and weird metaphor. We're going to try to unpack it a little bit. With this audio recording, we'll talk you through what we think it means, and we'll also be here with you in Squash House, using string and fabric to help visualize the metaphor, or expand it, or rethink it, or something. Turner's paper was a hit when it was delivered at the 1893 World's Fair. The 1890 census had just declared the frontier closed, and America was entering a new century and a new era. Westward expansion had just come to an end, and the Industrial Revolution was quickly transforming life for people around the world. At the time, historians rarely worked to contextualize history, rather tending to simply state what they saw as the facts. Turner's frontier thesis, as it came to be known, was a reframing of American history that helped Americans explain their past and justify their sense of national unity, superiority, and exceptionalism. As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. Glaciers, even though they appear stationary, are continually flowing downhill. Because of this continual flow, glaciers can act as a conveyor belt for the land that they flow atop, pushing rocks and earth as they move across the land. A terminal moraine is a ridge formed out of the rocks that a glacier pushes forward at the point where the glacier advances farthest along its path before retreating. Each glacier leaves behind it a terminal moraine. Glaciations are periods when glaciers grow and advance dramatically over the globe. These glaciers then retreat or sometimes even disappear during interglacial periods. So each glaciation sends new glaciers traveling across the land, and each new glacier leaves behind it a new terminal moraine. As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. Today, historians have different and more nuanced perspectives on the American frontier than Turner did, but his framing of the frontier as a site of perennial rebirth still holds immense cultural pull. Turner fractures the frontier, and in this metaphor, his phrase, each frontier, bears significance. Turner's conception of the frontier includes each place America's westward expanding border passed through, in effect the entire country, and in each spot, its evolution through time. The trader's frontier, the miner's frontier, the rancher's frontier, the farmer's frontier, and the metaphor suggests that each frontier in space and through time is leaving a trace into the future and into the spirit of the country. European fur traders along the Detroit River left a legacy that shaped the city, just as the French's subsequent theft of the land from the Anishinaabe did. And later, when Detroit was made into a riverside farming city, this transformation left its own traces and so on through time. As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. The frontiers did not end when the census declared the frontier closed in 1890. The frontier as an idea has held salience politically and culturally for America ever since. Martin Luther King Jr. referenced the legacy of America's frontier mentality, suggesting that a constant fleeing forward allowed the United States to avoid a true reckoning with its social problems, such as economic inequality, racism, crime and punishment, and violence. America fled forward and outward, engaging in imperialist campaigns, the space race extending from the Cold War, and continued faith in a capitalism that imagines the possibility of limitless growth. As successive terminal moraines result from successive glaciations, so each frontier leaves its traces behind it. In interglacial cycles, when glaciers have largely retreated, their terminal moraines litter the landscape. Here in the Great Lakes region, we are surrounded by moraines, often appearing as large, long, rolling hills. Take a look at your own topographical map of America. If you don't have one at the ready, you can look at the back of your hands. The bumps, ridges, sloping hills. Some of these are traces left from the larger forces that moved through long ago, now gone.
just walk to the skate park.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back the following day here to conclude the tour. Richard's not with us, so you just got me today, but we wanted to come upon the skate park on a sunny afternoon and see who's here. I did hear somebody skating. This is Reichert Sculpture Park. It's a skate park with sculpture and art. We call it Reichert Sculpture Park because it does all those things. And so there are public artworks here on display by artist Neri Ward, a fantastic human who, Jamaican born, lives in New York. He's got these 3 rocks called tired rocks. They're wrapped in tire treads. They have been embraced by the skaters. As you can see, they've been tagged as expected. Neri knew what was coming. And then the Goat Tower, greatest of all time, Goat Tower, which is kind of like our landmark. I mean, there's many reasons that this skate park is here. One of the reasons is we are this funny little section of the city, like between an expressway and another municipality, Hamtramck, a city inside the city of Detroit. And so I think Richard yesterday mentioned that it's kind of like a no man's zone in a way. Like, it didn't have much of a neighborhood identity for a long time. It's often overlooked. People would be like, where do you live? Nobody lives there. So part of the reason that one of the many reasons we love the Goat Tower is it really is kind of a landmark. And now as cars come flying up the Davison Expressway, and it turns into a surface drive here at the stoplight at the corner of Davison and Conant, is like you have something to mark space and time. And we love Neri's work for many reasons. Everyone look him up. It's also as anyone who lives in Southeast Michigan knows, it's very flat. So we were also super interested in like having some sort of terrain and topography that could be built up. We definitely wanted something durable, low maintenance for us, that's open and accessible like all the time. So there is no key, there is no locking this place up. It is here. Technically it's open from dawn till dusk, but it is not enforced. I think I mentioned yesterday that there's no lifeguard on duty. That's our liability clause. That's what we were advised to do. So it's like be here at your own risk in a way. And it's not super risky as far as we've heard from everyone. The community's embraced it, and there's a care and love for the place. And at this point it sort of has it does have an international reputation, which we adore. It's just a very unique
reputation. It
does, yeah. So like skate tours stop here, and I don't know if we want to walk around a little bit. Sometimes if you look up, if you search the hashtag Reichert Sculpture Park, one of the things I love is that like there are many photographs and videos of this place that I discover accidentally just by searching the hashtag, because I don't know who's here who's taking photos, and so we'll see but people will tag it, and so tag it both in terms of spray paint and social media tags. But yeah, like we'll see tour groups come through, and sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. Like on skate tours, so like Vans and Adidas and Thrasher and and one of the many funders of the park is the Tony Hawk Foundation, now called Skate Park Project.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and so he's been through. His wife is from Metro Detroit, so they also have like a family connection here. But and his son Riley Hawk has been through, and whatever their team, I'm forgetting the name of like their team, but Birdhouse Skate. So like sometimes you'll see vans here, vans like the shoe company, but also like a van full of skaters like roll out. There's also a bunch of skaters of color has really embraced the park. We had a pancake breakfast with them, which was fantastic, and Girls Who Skate and Christiana Smith's initiative, A Positive Seed. So it's really lovely for us to see like a diverse group of skaters and female skaters also like embrace the park and know that this space is open and accessible and available to them, and that this is a space of love and respect. So we do not tolerate hate. It's like the one thing we don't tolerate. We tolerate lots, but there's no hate. And the community kind of knows that too. So I don't know. It's a big weird social experiment for us, but it's a headache and a love. Like a measure of success for us would be if we how do you put it, we kind of like build ourselves out of a job. Like we don't need to be doing this anymore because the project was successful.
It lives on through everybody else
It's
taking care of it.
self-sustainable.
Yeah, and self-sustainable and living on through others in the sense that it's like there's no reason for, like, a lot of the things we started doing we did out of necessity, and so if the necessity isn't there anymore, that would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like designing yourself out of like needing to be there. Like that's kind of been our exit strategy, and some things are getting there. I think like the collective ownership handoff thing is like part of it. Like that makes more sense to me than building up like a mega institution in the shape of a pyramid that then needs to be like the legacy gets left to whatever happens next, because every time I've seen that happen, like the visions change, as they should. Like new people come on board, the visions change, like the whole thing becomes something else anyway. So I think we've always tried to set up from the beginning is like, how do we address some of the conditions, make it work better for the community that's here, and then like exit gracefully, because like everything's kind of set up to morph into something else or dissolve into the ether because we don't need to do it anymore. Anyway, so that's, I think like measures of success and goals are something that we've kind of messed with in like an absurdist, perverse way, like, and hopefully for the better. Like we for sure never wanted to build an institution, but how do you build something? I forget what Anya calls them, mini institutions or micro institutions. It's like maybe the terminology.
Institution.
Yeah, but it does need some kind of structure or form to exist. Like it's not just going to happen on its own. So what are the alternatives? So I think we've spent a lot of time looking at alternative models or trying to figure out how to warp or twist expectations, because we didn't want to become an institution in the sense that it needed like a lot of administrative infrastructure and it needed to be something like that lives on in perpetuity. Like I don't know if I believe in things living on in perpetuity. So anyway, we'll leave it with, as we dissolve into
becoming useless.
like total success.
That's awesome. Being useless is successful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's my goal.
Rolls around.